So we do not have long now until the May local elections. And indeed, these are going to be very, very big indicator. First of all, it's going to be a big one for what the verdict is of Rishi Sunak. And I don't think, to be honest, that the British voting public are really going to deliver a good verdict for Sunak, let alone the fact that, as we've said, Conservatives themselves are probably not going to deliver a good verdict for Rishi Sunak. We've already talked about the missing 10% and the desperation of having to bring in someone like Lee Anderson to be the deputy party whip to at least, in some theoretical way, try and hold on to some of these red wall seats. Because Lee Anderson, just like Liz Truss, popular within the party, despite the fact that, well, I don't think the man could power a light bulb if you asked him to. Like I say, that's my sort of verdict on Lee Anderson. Like I say, there is a reason why it's called 30p Lee. But it's not just the Conservatives that are looking at how these local elections are going to play out. Labour will also be looking at these local elections very, very carefully. They have been putting out messaging very recently, and they are going to see at these local elections how their messaging plays out. Because this will determine certainly the direction that they will go in for the general election. And I've said this before, I think Starmer needs to be a lot more bold, a lot more braver about his policies and sort of the direction of what he really wants to do. And I think he really needs to come across like that. He really needs to be aware that he and Rishi Sunak are going to go pretty much into a boxing ring, and Rishi Sunak is going to be fighting for his, political life and potentially that of the Tory party as well. So they are not going to go down easily, and they will go down swinging. And Starmer has plenty of enough ammunition to be able to absolutely wallop the Tories plenty of times. So he has to be brave. And I do hope that even though the attacks on recently of Rishi Sunak, those attacks on the going against sort of Sunak recently, have sort of not been received too well. There are other ways they can attack the Tories for their numerous failings. Like I say, Sunak cannot run on what is essentially 13 years of failure. Also, the recent report that, Labour should start to say that, Brexit has not gone right and that it is the Conservatives' fault. Start tarring them with the brush of Brexit failure. It does seem like it might be a good strategy, but we'll see what happens at the local elections. I do sort of worry with the fact that, of course, the leader of the team, the writer of the book, How to Re-Win the Red Wall, I've gone over my sort of feelings for her before. I don't think she's a really good campaigner, but we'll see what happens. Maybe she might turn out to be good. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's something I worry about. But anyway, I say let's go into this and see how both Labour and Conservatives feel about going into the general election. Certainly a lot of doom and gloom from the Conservative side, and a lot of hope and energy from the Labour, which again is pretty good. We've got to go and certainly go in and maintain that energy. So before we do go into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, like, share, and subscribe button. Links down below. Patreon page, one-off donation link, buy me coffee. YouTube thank you button, Pony Club also down below as well. So as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. So over we go to have a look at this. So the decision of Greg Hands, the Conservative chair, to breezily announce in a TV interview that the party expects to lose 1,000 seats in the next month's local elections has raised a few eyebrows amongst his own MPs. Why did he do that for? One bemused MP asked. You always have to manage expectations, but this seems a little bit early and a little bit excessive. All local elections results tend to be scrutinised with nearly obsessive zeals by pundits and, of course, by parties and MPs. But the voting across 230 English councils on May the 4th feels more significant. And it really will be. This is the last election opportunity, the last sort of chance before probably the next general election. So this, I think, will help to determine the direction in which parties go, or they expect how they will do or fare in the next general election. So this is going to be heavily scrutinized, absolutely. So with the first actual verdict of on Rishi Sunak since he became Prime Minister, however filtered and diffused that verdict is. While Labour's national lead does remain large, the slight tightening in some polls puts plus the government achievements such as the revised Northern Ireland Protocol has helped to create the narrative that the government woes may be easing, and that the next general election could be tighter than expected. But a bad result for the Conservatives on May the 4th would compound the renewed troubles, such as the departure of Dominic Raab's, and Sunak's electoral balloon could deflate all over again. If Hans is right and the Tories shed at least 1,000+ seats, it would be undoubtedly a bad result. The last time the councils were fought over like this was in 2019, when Theresa May was in the trough of her unpopularity, weeks away from agreeing a timetable to step down, and the party lost over 1,300 councillors. The rump of support is still for a return of Boris Johnson before the next general election may have always identified a number of moments of peril for Sunak. And of course, the first of those pinned hopes were on the settling of the dispute over the Northern Ireland Protocol. But despite the rebellions from Johnson and former Prime Minister Liz Truss, a well-organised government whipping operation saw off that threat. And of course, you've got to remember, this has not got the DUP back into office. Stormont is still not operating effectively. Even with the threat of a general election being posed, the DUP still see no reason to go into power, meaning that power sharing in Northern Ireland means that Northern Ireland does not have an effective functioning government. Has not solved what was meant to be the main reason for this renegotiation in the first place, which was to get the DUP back into power sharing. And of course, a very open admission recently from a senior DUP official basically said that they thought that by voting for Brexit, there would be a return to a hard land border, which we've said, because of the Good Friday Agreement, you cannot do. This delusion that they operated under should, by now at least, be longly shattered, and that any return to a pre-Good Friday Agreement status is absolutely delusional for them to believe. So, some of Sunak's critics are waiting for the next moment to remind the Tories of what a poor electoral predicament they are in. I think colleagues are very much in a denial stage, where they are so relieved that the days of Liz are over that they are able now to blank out how badly they are going to lose. One Sunak backing MP said, "I do think there will come a moment. I don't know if this will be it when it starts to loom large again. The party does not always make the best decisions in a panic." An MP did intimate that they believed that some more junior MPs, many from the Red Wall, who were more likely to start to panic again. And that's very, very true, because they took the Red Wall seats and they are still being called Red Wall seats, because it does look like that these voters who voted them in have had enough of them, that they do not want to keep them. And all indications are that they are going to lose their seats. So absolutely, there is going to be potentially a massive panic after these May the 4th elections, most predominantly from these Red Wall MPs. I wouldn't even expect maybe even 30p Lee to be involved in that panic, because after all, he's one of those Red Wall MPs. But key local authorities, which are being watched closely for how they map onto the general picture, are the Bolsover Council, where Labour needs to see off a challenge from a mix of independents, the High Peak Council, where Labour is hoping to secure a majority, and the councils in Ayrshire, Hartlepool, North East Derbyshire, and Southampton, where Labour hopes to make gains. Labour strategists say that they are wise to expect the management, wise to the expectation management from the Tories, and that they are to believe that they will be in the air war in hours after the results, with their opponents trying to keen to portray any Labour gains worse than they are expected. But the main focus is to try and drill down the result to plan for the next phase of the general election strategy. The most important things for us is to know that we are on track, is what we will need to do, one senior advisor Keir Starmer says. In 2020, even when we were closing the gap in the polls, we were just not gaining ground in the areas that we needed to. Last year, what we needed to see was not just the polling improve, but our vote distribution improving as well, which again is sort of saying. It was a great win for Totemic Labour councillors, for the London councils. But it was even more important that we were winning in areas of Cumbria and gaining ground in Kirklees. Labour does believe that the Tory losses may well not be as bad as expected, because the party is likely to win back some seats from independent parties who did particularly well in 2019. I think that we will have a good set of local elections and focus on the right places and the outcome that we're looking for. But it is more about, pardon me, bless me, what we need to know and what we need to be in for the general election, the strategist said. So how worried should Rishi Sunak be about his leadership in the aftermath of these results? Now, bear in mind, Johnson is gone. Like, Johnson as a potential threat is gone, but it does not stop other MPs from essentially starting a mass panic. That, I think, could be still very likely. So how would there be aftermath of the results? And can you really map general election results using local polls as a predictor? Well, there were several such factors to consider, said Paul Sutteridge, a professor of political sociology at Bristol University and the deputy director of UK and a Changing Europe think tank. He had this to say. There are a whole lot of industry that exists around converting local election results into equivalent national shares to try and take into account the fact that locals in some places and not all other of that stuff, he said. I think what gets missed is that in that pool of voters who turn out at local elections is quite different, or perhaps more restricted than those that turn out for general elections. And that's true. Local election results are very small. Very small numbers of people turn out to vote. The average voter turnout, as we said, for local elections is around 25%. So if you have an extra burst of, or even a loss of 5% of voters don't turn up, or 10% of voters don't turn up, as we've seen in some of these by-elections recently, well, that can spell a massive potential win. So, like I say, make sure at the local elections you get out and vote. Whether you've already got your postal vote, make sure you've got your identity documents sorted out if you are in case. Like I say, I think unfortunately it's now too late to sign up for the voter ID recognition, but like I say, that's also going to be a big thing, certainly after these local elections as well. But we'll see what happens when that happens. So he continues saying the key things, there are different things about the groups that turn out in local elections, is that they tend to be quite high political attention voters who are likely to have seen the attack ads and other things, that possibly they even watch Question Time, and they are even more likely to have a party identity. As I just said, they're more likely to be, on tune to tracking local elections. So what we've seen in recent general elections is that the lower attention voters that tend to sort of move around more and tend to produce these slightly surprising results, they tend not to turn out at local elections. As we said, like I say, vastly different turnout from local elections to general elections. In one sense, this is good news for Sunak. A poor result on May the 4th may not necessarily argue as much for the next general election, but as Surridge points out, there is a flip side. losing a large number of councillors would seem to indicate that even engaged loyal Tories are either staying at home or, in some cases, even changing sides. And that's what we're watching, certainly in the next general election. Where did that 10% go? Were they staying at home or were they changing sides? So the Liberal Democrats and Greens, who both tended to do well in the recent sets of local elections, who expect certainly more gains next month, a place of the high priority on council seats, which does help embed them in these new areas, providing a ready-made garrison of leafleters and door knockers. There is already, contrary to this, for a party on the losing side. The Conservatives currently have about 7,000 councillors across the UK. If Hans is correct, they could lose about 15% or more of their core election fighting machine. So, if this is true, it will have a knock-on effect. There has been a constant warning, or at least the hope, from those red wall councillors that now they've won the MPs, that those local councillors would turn red as well, because that would then enable them to help fight at the next general election. That has not happened. That has not happened for many of these red walls MPs. So they are really, really worried about their election prospects. Many of them do not want to be one-term MPs. So I do think that there will be a bit of a panic from these red wallers. There absolutely will be. The Lib Dems also say that they have evidence that voters who switch to them from the Tories in the local elections are also more likely to do so in a general election. Again, interesting information if it is true. So, with the party pouring resources into council areas with which even overlap with targeting constituencies. As ever, with the local elections on May the 5th, just about every party will say they have had a good night. Only some, however, will actually be telling the truth. And that will be indeed the case. Like I say, these local elections are going to be highly scrutinized because this is probably the last chance before the general election. And it will determine strategies not only for Labour, as we said, but also the Conservatives, most likely the Liberal Democrats as well. Like I say, they are certainly, as we have seen with their successes in the by-elections, all this started with them focusing and doing door-knocking campaigns, looking at where they could win. And they identified these seats, which they said, look, if we really focus on this by-election, we can win this seat. And they won 2 incredible by-elections, knocking through the blue wall, which if they continue that focus, which they seem to do, this could have certainly big consequences at a general election. And if it is true, as they say, that people who vote for them at a local council are even more likely to switch their vote over to them at a general election, well, this does not spell good news for the Tories. Even if this goes into a very, very tight election, ultimately it could prove that the seats that maybe the Lib Dems take from the Tories prove to be the deciding factor in a general election win. So, like I say, something to sort of speculate about, something to look about. But like I say, you can't really sort of look at the poll. Like I say, the poll's a good indicator, but ultimately it's what happens on the night. And sometimes you can have surprising shocks, surprising results. Sometimes the polls get it right. Sometimes the polls don't get it right all the time. But very often the polls are a good indicator of what could happen on election night. And at the moment, for the local elections, it's not looking good. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.